Hey everyone, my name is Montana H from astrologyforbabes.com, where we talk about astrocartography, astrology, synastry, and other topics related to spirituality through a modern, practical lens. I do offer readings, so check out the link in the description for more information on that. But today we're here to talk about Pluto lines in astrocartography. As we know, astrocartography is a subdivision of astrology where, very simply put, we look at your natal chart and map it out longitudinally and latitudinally on a global map in order to find out the best and most impactful places for you around the globe in terms of career success, romance, family life, spirituality, etc. Astrocartography can help answer questions like, will the energy of a particular area be supportive towards boosting a career as a writer, for example, or supporting your romantic life? Or will you instead be working against some objectively difficult energies that are destabilizing or isolating, and what to do about it? It's important to remember that in astrocartography, looking at planetary lines like a Pluto line is really only scratching the tip of the iceberg as far as accurately predicting what energies an area is likely to have in store for you. So to truly be more accurate, in addition to looking at planetary lines, you're going to want to employ more techniques to look at your map through different lenses. You're going to want to look at the condition of your natal chart. You're going to want to look at the relocated chart of the area you're considering. You may want to look at local space lines, look at current astrological transits, etc., etc. But if you are just simply looking to understand Pluto lines, this video is an excellent place to start. So let's start by talking about Pluto in astrology, because so much of astrocartography starts with astrology. So in astrology, Pluto represents the cycle of death and rebirth, transformation, intensity, and power dynamics. It can represent the darker aspects of life, such as the occult, obsessions, hidden sexual desires, destruction, the underbelly of society, all of those things. But through a more positive lens, Pluto can also represent wealth, the ability to amass power and influence, and can really be a deep catalyst for very big change. It can be like a gorgeous, shining phoenix rising from the ashes, right? That's very Plutonian in nature, a more positive aspect. So you can see, though, even the more positive aspects of Pluto are still very intense. So Pluto, the name of the game, is always just going to be intense. And if you think about what zodiac sign this reminds you of, it's probably Scorpio, which makes sense because while Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, Pluto is actually considered to be the modern ruler of Scorpio. So Scorpio is co-ruled by both Mars and Pluto. Wherever Pluto is located in your chart can show you what areas of life you will experience deaths and rebirths, or where you possess an ability to gain power and influence. You could also be more prone to Plutonian influences in that area of your chart, generally speaking, which isn't usually a good thing. So for example, if you have Pluto conjunct your ascendant in your first house, which governs your appearance and the way you move about in the world, people might describe you as being intimidating, or as being sexy, or even scary. Pluto square your moon in the sixth house, which governs your health routines, could bring some really intense medical crises into your life. Pluto conjunct Mars in the fourth house could have brought very traumatic experiences to your childhood, having to do with perhaps anger and aggression. But on a lighter note, not that there's anything light to do with Pluto ever, but Pluto conjunct Mercury in the third house of communication and learning and thought could give you a obsessive, probing mind, but that could be a amazing natural asset to have if you have a career as a researcher or as an astrologer, for instance. So all of this is going to help us understand what to expect when dealing with Pluto lines in astrocartography. So now let's talk about the general themes that may become highlighted in a person's life when they're on a Pluto line. Hint, they're not the funnest. Taking cues from the astrological signifiers that I just went over in astrocartography, Pluto lines are intense, if nothing else. And that one saying, what doesn't end you makes you stronger, that absolutely comes to mind when thinking of Pluto lines, and it should probably be the motto, in fact. I will also say that the longer that you're on a Pluto line, the more difficult people tend to find that it is to leave. Pluto lines and really Saturn lines too are sticky. they're hard to get away from. It's hard to just pack up your bags and reestablish yourself somewhere else. Things will happen, and not necessarily bad things, but things will happen to keep you on a Pluto or on a Saturn line. It just seems to be a common thread in all of my clients, and I've actually experienced this too to some degree, so keep that in mind. So one thing a person may experience on a Pluto line is getting caught up in power dynamics. This could typically be someone exerting their power over you, or trying to strip you of your power, or making you feel powerless, meeting powerful people, a desire and the ability to amass power, which that's probably one of the better infestations. That's probably one of the better manifestations of this theme of power. Power and influence is likely to pop up, even on a Pluto Piran or crossing point, for example, where one of your Pluto lines crosses with another planetary line. So like on a Jupiter-Pluto Piran, Jupiter, which is typically a benefic, positive energy, could help bring you this power and influence, which even that isn't overtly positive. It's just like a natural thing, power influence. And it's the person who is experiencing this which will help determine how this energy plays out, as well as what's going on in their natal chart, whether it's positive or negative for those around them. So that's one thing that you may notice. Another common theme that typically comes into play on a Pluto line is that of intensity. You may find that life is very intense, and typically intensity doesn't feel very good. It doesn't feel very sustainable, and it can feel very overwhelming. So that could play out as the people you meet being very intense, or developing an obsessive interest in you that feels very intense, or you could develop an obsessive interest in something. You could witness heavy experiences in your neighborhood, for example, or you could be forced to engage with intense people or have these interactions just thrust upon you in your face. You will just probably find that you're on the receiving end of intense, potentially angry emotions. Pluto lines really just don't bring a light energy with them. So let's look on the bright side of a Pluto line for a second. So when you find yourself on a Pluto line, one thing is for certain. If you leave, no, not if, when you leave, if you want to leave, when you leave, you will feel transformed. This transformation isn't going to come easily. It's not going to come cheaply. There will be a cost, but you will feel transformed. And you're probably going to feel like you have died and been reborn. Sometimes this is through trauma or through very wild experiences, but Pluto lines are a catalyst for growth. That is ultimately what they want to do, is bring change and transformation and rebirth. It's kind of like that phoenix that I mentioned earlier that rises from the ashes. This is likely to be you in some way. So those are the three general themes of what to expect on a Pluto line: power dynamics, intensity, and transformation. And 9 times out of 10, these themes are going to be heavy and difficult, and will sometimes bring experiences that feel like an insurmountable big crisis in some way, to be completely honest. But you typically can overcome them, and that saying that I mentioned earlier, what doesn't end you makes you stronger. That's the theme of Pluto lines. So now let's talk about Pluto lines hitting those 4 very important angles in your birth chart: the MC, the IC, the DC, and the AC. And again, you do want to think about where Pluto is in your natal birth chart, what it's doing, what aspects it's making to your sun, for example, for potentially career matters, or to your moon for emotions and even potentially your bodily health, or to your Venus as it relates to your finances or potentially love, to get a better picture of how these energies are going to play out for you personally. Please leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. What comes up for you? Have you been to a Pluto line? Do you live on your Pluto line? Did you manage to leave? No, I'm just kidding. Are you staying? Did you have a positive transformation? Let me know. I love to hear about your experiences in the comments. It's one of my favorite things about working with clients, is hearing how these energies have played out for them too. So one question I do get all the time is, do you have to live on the planetary line exactly in order to feel the influence of that energy? And the answer is no. You can actually be about 100 miles on either side of the planetary line in general and still be within its orb of influence, or its area of influence energetically. So for Pluto lines, it's more of a cautionary tale than like a thing you want to probably seek out. But here we go. Let's start with the Pluto MC line. So in your personal chart, your MC or midheaven is the most visible point in your chart. It points to your professional persona. So a Pluto MC line is going to bring a lot of these themes around power dynamics to your public persona, your profession. So if you work in, let's say, politics in some way, or if you're very deep into the occult as a profession, I could really potentially see you harnessing these Plutonian energies in a way that might have a net positive for you. However, some of the more difficult ways that this could manifest could be a total destruction of your career as you knew it. You could have a very traumatic experience in the workplace, or something that derails your social standing in some way, in a way that feels very difficult and traumatic and a bit like a crisis. It's not the most pleasant energy, as I said before, and even the more positive manifestations of a Pluto MC line, like being in politics potentially, even when there is a nice shiny front, politics is very heavy career, and a lot goes on behind the scenes that's hidden from the public eye. It's very Plutonian. So I would say that on a Pluto MC line, you want to be aware that your public standing or your position in the world could go through some sort of intense period that, once it's over, could leave your world feeling transformed when compared to what it was like before. Pluto IC Lines. Pluto IC Lines typically mean that a person's home life, the four walls that they live in, or their sense of safety is about to get very heavy. What we often see on a Pluto IC line are some of the more negative manifestations of Plutonian energy, and there's not too many bright sides here, I have to be honest. I've seen this manifest as people in your neighborhood or housemates becoming stalkerish towards you, or some power abuse or some manipulation in the home that feels very difficult, or potentially some information, some deep-rooted information being uprooted about a person's family line or lineage, a deep, dark secret that shatters a person's sense of reality and forces them to rebirth or reimagine what home is, what makes family, what do I do with this difficult truth. So generally, a person's home life is not going to be restful and it's not going to be pleasant on a Pluto IC line, so be aware. If that doesn't sound like your idea of a good time, or if you're one of those types of people where your home is your sanctuary, or you have a low tolerance for, I was going to say, for destruction, I'm just being a little dramatic, but you do want to be careful of spending time on a Pluto IC line, especially if Pluto is in your natal chart poorly aspected to your fourth house or something like that. On a Pluto AC line, the name of the game is intensity, and it's going to follow you around, okay? So you may find that you attract these very intense experiences that leave you feeling shook, okay? So you may witness some sort of traumatic scene, and you could be like, why do I keep being in the vicinity of all of these things when these crazy things are happening? And if it's not this, you may notice that you begin to embody Plutonian themes, or people's reaction to you could puzzle you because they're acting a little bit afraid of you, or like you're accidentally intimidating them in some way you didn't mean to, or that people find you to be really intense when previously this wasn't a thing about your personality that was so true. So let's also not forget that AC lines in astrocartography have a lot to do with you and your body. And so if you have tendencies to get involved with rougher people, or to get involved in activities that have a darker side to them, you may find that you're more easily drawn back into those activities, or you even could experience a life or death experience. Some of these experiences could manifest as being very strange or intense or difficult to diagnose, or a difficult to recover from type of illness. So depending on how Pluto is aspected in your chart, again, you could potentially find these transformational energies to be very renewing. And so you could take that into account as well. So for example, this could be a place where after much trials and tribulations, you step into your personal power and gain influence, if that's going to be part of your life journey. Be aware that on Pluto AC lines, people may interpret your actions in a way that is more intense or more threatening than you meant to be. And you may attract these types of people into your life. And to just overall, I caution you to be aware of your surroundings. Lastly, let's talk about Pluto DC lines. On a Pluto DC line, these intense energies of Pluto are being brought to your one-on-one relationships. So if you are someone who works with clients, you could find yourself attracting powerful, wealthy clients, for example. Or on the dating front, you could find that a lot of your options that are just circling around your orbit are people who have an element of danger to them, like that bad boy, bad girl archetype. Similarly to on a Pluto IC line, you could attract stalkers or people who are being obsessive over you in some way. Or you could find yourself behaving in that way and getting yourself into super toxic relationships and friendships where there is an element of control or your power being taken away or power being manipulated. Not pleasant, okay? Not pleasant. So definitely if you're on a Pluto DC line, make sure that you're watchful with your new connections. And if you see any sign of these behaviors surfacing, distance yourself, because you're probably right. You're probably picking up on energy that's absolutely there in spades. I do want to emphasize one more time that you really do want to look at a variety of astrocartographic techniques to really understand how these different energies are going to play out in your life for you, specifically based on your natal chart, because everybody's natal chart is very different. So again, you are going to want to maybe look at your local space lines, look at current transits to see what's going on with the slower moving planets, look at your relocated chart for areas. If you have any questions, feel free to book a reading with me. My information is below, and I'll be back soon with another video on astrocartography.